Suddenly the ruling pattern of the world was revealed to me with beautiful clarity. I understood why some people were strong and others weak, some free and others enslaved, some rich and others poor, some well and others sick. The former had simply been the first to see the need for prayer and for collecting the maximum number of days of indulgence. Somewhere far above all these prayers coming from earth were properly classified, so that every person had his bin where his days of indulgence were stored. I saw in my mind the unending heavenly pastures full of bins, some big and bulging with days of indulgence, others small and almost empty. Elsewhere I could see unused bins to accommodate those who, like myself, had not yet discovered the value of prayer. I stopped blaming others. The fault was mine alone. I thought I had been too stupid to find the governing principle of the world of people, animals, and events. But now there was an order in the human world, and justice too. One had only to recite prayers, concentrating on the ones carrying the greatest number of days of indulgence. Then, one of God's aides would immediately note that the new member of the faithful and allocate to him a place in which his days of indulgence would start accumulating like sacks of wheat piled up at harvest time. I was confident in my strength. I believed that in a short while I would collect more days of indulgence than any other people, that my bin would fill quickly, and that heaven would have to assign me a larger one, and even that would overflow, and I would need a bigger one, as big as the church itself. Feigning casual interest, I asked the priest to show me the prayer book. I quickly noted the prayers marked with the largest number of indulgence days, and asked him to teach them to me. He was somewhat surprised by my preference for some prayers and indifference to others, but he agreed and read them to me several times. I made an effort to concentrate all the powers of my mind and body in memorizing them. I soon knew them perfectly. I was ready to start a new life. I had all that was needed and glorified in the knowledge that the days of punishment and humiliation would soon be past. Until now I had been a small bug that anyone might smash. From now on the humble bug would be an unapproachable bull. There was no time to lose. Any spare moment could be used for one more prayer. Thus earning additional days of indulgences for my heavenly account. I would soon be rewarded with the Lord's grace, and Garbos would not torment me any more. I now devoted my entire time to prayers. I rattled them off quickly, one after another, occasionally slipping in one that carried fewer days of indulgence. I did not want heaven to think that I neglected the more humble prayers completely. After all, one could not outwit the Lord. Garbos could not understand what had happened to me. Seeing me continuously mumbling something under my breath and paying little attention to his threats, he suspected that I was casting some gypsy spells on him. I did not want to tell him the truth. I was afraid that in some unknown matter he might forbid me to pray, or even worse, as the Christian of older standing than myself, use his influence in heaven to nullify my prayers, or perhaps divert some of them to his undoubtedly empty bin. He started to beat me more often. Sometimes, when he asked me something that I was and I was in the middle of a prayer, I would answer him immediately, anxious not to lose the days of indulgence which I was earning. Garbus thought I was getting impudent, and wanted to break me down. He was also afraid that I might get bold enough to tell the priest about the beatings. Thus my life was spent alternately praying and being beaten. I muttered prayers continuously from dawn to dusk, losing count of the days of indulgence I was earning, but almost seeing the pile constantly rising until some of the saints, stopping on their strolls to the heavenly pastures, looking approvingly at the flocks of prayers soaring up from earth like sparrows, all coming from a small boy with black hair and black eyes. I visualized my name being mentioned in the councils of the angels, then at those of some minor saints, later at those of major saints, and so closer and closer to the heavenly throne. Garbus thought I was losing respect for him. Even when he was beating me harder than usual, I did not lose time, but continued collecting my days of indulgence. After all, pain came and went, but the indulgences were in my bin forever. The present was bad, precisely because I had not known earlier about such a marvelous way of improving my future. I could not afford to lose any more time. I had to make up for lost years. Garbus was now convinced that I was in a gypsy trance, which could bring no good. I swore to him that I was only praying, but he did not believe me. His fears were soon confirmed. One day a cow broke through the barn door and went to the neighbor's garden, causing considerable damage. The neighbor was furious and rushed into Garbus' orchard with an axe and cut down all the pear and apple trees in revenge. Garbus was sleeping dead drunk, and Judas was helplessly straining at his chain. To complete the disaster, a fox got into the hen house the next day and killed some of the best laying hens. That same evening, with one stroke of his paw, Judas massacred Garbus' pride, a fine turkey he had purchased recently at a great expense. Garbus broke down completely. He got drunk on homemade vodka and revealed to me his secret. He would have killed me long ago had he not been afraid of St. Anthony, his patron. He knew, too, that I had counted his teeth, and that my death would cost him many years of his life. Of course, he added, if Judas should kill me accidentally, then he would be perfectly safe from my spells, and St. Anthony would not punish him. In the meantime, the priest was sick at the vicarage. He apparently caught a cold in the chilly church. He was lying in his fevered and hallucinatory state in his room, talking to himself or to God. I once took the vicar some eggs, a gift from Garbus. I climbed on the fence to see the vicar. His face was pale. His older sister, a short, buxom woman with her hair piled in a bun, was fussing about the bed, and the local wise women were letting his blood and applying leeches which grew plump as soon as they fattened on his body. I was astonished. The priest must have accumulated an extraordinary number of days of indulgences during his pious life, and yet he was lying sick like anybody else. A new priest arrived at the vicarage. He was old, bald, and had a very thin, parchmental-like face. He wore a violet band on his cassock. When he saw me, he returned with a basket and called me and asked me where I, with my swarthy looks, had come from. The organist, seeing us together, quickly whispered some words to the priest. He gave me a blessing and walked away. The organist then told me the vicar did not want me to make myself too conspicuous at church. Many people came there, and although the priest believed that I was neither a gypsy or a Jew, the suspicious Germans might take different view, and the parish would suffer severe reprisals. I quickly rushed to the church altar. I started reciting prayers desperately, and only those with the greatest number of days of indulgence attached to them. I had little time left. Besides, who knows? Perhaps prayers at the altar itself, under the tearful eye of God's Son, and the motherly gaze of the Virgin Mary, might carry greater weight than those said elsewhere. They might have a shorter route to travel to heaven, or they might possibly be carried by a special messenger, using a faster conveyance like a train on rails. The organist saw me alone in the church and reminded me again about the new priest mourning, so I bade farewell regretfully to the altar and all its familiar objects. Garbos was waiting for me at home. As soon as he entered, he dragged me to the empty room to the corner of the house. There, at the highest point of the ceiling, 2 large hooks had been driven into the beams, less than 2 feet apart. Leather straps were attached to each of the handles. Garbos climbed on a stool, lifted me high, and told me to grab a handle with each hand. Then he lifted me suspended and brought Judas into the room. On his way out, he locked the door. Judas saw me hanging from the ceiling and immediately jumped up at an effort to reach my feet. I brought my legs up and missed them by a few inches. He started another run and tried again, still missing. After a few more tries, he lay down and waited. I had to watch him. When freely hanging, my feet were no more than 6 feet above the ground, and Judas could easily reach them. I did not know how long I would have to hang like this. I guessed that Garbos expected me to fall down and be attacked by Judas. This would frustrate the efforts I had been making all these months, counting Garbos' teeth, including the yellow, ingrown ones at the back of his mouth. Innumerable times when Garbos was drunk with vodka and snored open-mouthed, I had counted his loathsome teeth painstakingly. This was my weapon against him. Whenever he beat me too long, I reminded him of the number of his teeth. If he did not believe me, he could check the count himself. I knew every one of them, no matter how wobbly, how putrefied, or how nearly hidden under the gums. If he killed me, he would have very few years to live. However, if I fell down into the waiting fangs of Judas, Garbos would have a clear conscience. He would have nothing to fear, and his patron, St. Anthony, might even give him absolution for my accidental death. My shoulders were becoming numb. I shifted my weight, opened and closed my hand, and slowly relaxed my legs, lowering them dangerously near the floor. Judas was on the corner pretending to be asleep, but I knew his tricks as well as I knew mine. He knew that I still had some strength left, and that I could lift my legs faster than he could leap after them, so he waited for fatigue to overcome me. The pain in my body raced in 2 directions. One went from the hands to the shoulders and the neck, the other from the legs to the waist. There were 2 different kinds of pain, boring towards my middle like 2 moles, tunneling towards each other underground. The pain from my hands was easier to endure. I could cope with it by switching my weight from one hand to the other, relaxing the muscles, and then taking the load up again, hanging on one hand while blood returned to the other. The pain from between my legs and abdomen was more persistent, and once it settled in my belly, it refused to leave. It was like a woodworm that finds its cozy spot behind a knot in a timber and stays there forever.